There we go. All right. Hello, everyone. This is Catherine Price. I'm the author of the How to Feel Alive Substack, and I am here with my friend Dan Harris, who writes the Dan Harris Substack. Uh, we
I'm laughing because I should change it. It's so egotistical just to be the Dan Harris podcast, Substack.
well, it's kind of funny to talk about it that way because I'm like, I'll be joined by Dan Harris, author of the danharris.com Substack. But I mean, one of my goals for our conversation today is to get people as possible to subscribe to your newsletter. So maybe we just did that. Anyway, Dan is an expert on meditation and a former anchor at Good Morning America and Nightline, among many other things he's done. He's the host of the 10% Happier podcast and the author of the 10% Happier book. Dan and I met years ago through my book, How to Break Up with Your Phone, and then subsequently have had interesting experiences such as giving TED Talks the same year together. And wonderful memory, Dan, first of all, of you being the first person I saw after my talk was over, and you gave me such a reassuring hug. It was so nice. And you also offered to get my earrings for me from my hotel room. I don't think you probably remember that, but it was very thoughtful. So anyway, so excited to get to talk to you today. So thanks for making the time.
Thanks for having me. I'm a huge fan of, I mean, you personally, but also I recommend How to Break Up with Your Phone all the time. So it's been a it is my go-to recommendation when people ask, how do I not get so wrapped up in this device that's degrading my quality of life.
Thank you. Thank you for recommending it for that. Um, well, that is, of course, what we're here to talk about today because I've been running, as hopefully people know, a phone breakup challenge for the month of February in honor of the release of the revised edition of How to Break Up with Your Phone. And we are in week 3 right now. And the theme of week 3 is to rebuild our attention spans, which in many cases have totally atrophied as a result of the things we're doing on our phones. And that's why I thought, who better to talk to than Dan? Since he has such a background in meditation. And I also started to notice something really interesting in the chat that I've been running for my paid subscribers, where we've been going through the breakup step by step together, which is that I've accidentally triggered a lot of anxiety in
Hmm,
people,
hmm.
like a lot of anxiety. That's probably the one of the biggest themes in our chat is this feeling of just nervousness and anxiousness that comes when people start to try to separate from their devices. So I'm really excited to talk to you both about how we can use meditation to help build back our muscles of attention, and then also how to use meditation and mindfulness to cope with anxiety, whether it's triggered by the phone or anything else in life. So I guess the first thing I wanted to ask you about, and you can take this wherever you want, but can you give us a sense of what meditation actually is? Because I think that that can be actually a widely used but often misunderstood word for people, both
Yeah,
mindfulness, meditation, and mindfulness.
I'm happy to yammer about that, but I'm just so curious when you say that anxiety is showing up among people who are trying to break up with their phone. What's the source of that anxiety?
Well, I think that there's a lot of emotional sources for the anxiety. I think that it may be because, well, two things come to mind. One is that I think that using our phones to cover up anxiety and try to
Uh,
soothe. And so when you take it away, you're left with these thoughts that you haven't dealt with, these feelings
mm,
you've been kind of suppressing them with the phone. And I think it also is because people are so conditioned to feel like they have to check their phones all the time because they don't want to leave people hanging. They don't want to miss something important. That when they separate themselves from their phone, even for a couple of hours, that triggers anxiety too. So I kind of think it's two separate things happening at once.
right. So you're removing this dysfunctional source of self-soothing, and you are and I believe you wrote about this in your book that one of the diabolically ingenious aspects of the design of the phone and the apps on the phone is that if you're not checking, you feel twitchy with FOMO and a sense that you're not only missing something cool, but that you're missing something that you're going to get in trouble for missing from your boss or something like that. So,
Yeah. Or
is
you know,
that a
your
good summary?
parents, you're worried you might miss, that one in a million like emergency call. It just is
Yeah,
anxiety triggering for a lot of
yeah.
people.
Well,
Yeah.
on the second part, like there are, I mean, I'm sure you get into this. There are fixes for that. You can. I mean, I put my phone away all the time, but I have a watch, and I know that if there's a call that comes in that is really important, like my parents are in assisted living, and if somebody has a fall, like I'll get the call, but I'm just not looking at my phone during dinner.
This makes me so excited, Dan, because the other thing we did, I don't know, years ago is I remember coming to your apartment and we did a phone breakup, like, challenge together, and I remember finding a place for you to charge your phone that wasn't your bedroom, and you were crawling around in your closet,
Yeah.
be like Good Morning America, like, filming you. So that's so cool doing, special do not disturb settings on the watch to only let certain calls through, or
Yeah.
just so few people call use the phone to call that it's not an issue. Like, how did you do that?
Exactly. I didn't, it didn't require any fancy, um, and I promise everybody I will talk about meditation, but it did not require any fancy settings on the phone. I essentially, I wear the watch, and if somebody calls that I don't need to talk to, I just refuse the call. But if it's my mom or I'm away and it's my wife, even though the phone is charging in a different room, I can take it. So in some ways, and I remember Farhad Manjoo, who's this brilliant tech writer for the New York Times, when the watch first came out, the Apple Watch, he said that he thought the number one application of the watch will be to wean you off your phone. So it's technology that, when used properly, can lead to a healthier relationship with technology. And so I have found that the watch really reduces the anxiety, or at least one part of the anxiety that people feel as they try to create healthy boundaries with the phone.
I think that's really important for people to keep in mind that a lot of this is about experimenting with systems that work for you.
Yes.
Yeah, because I remember going to the Apple store when the first watch came out and asking that question, like, "Are people coming in to use this instead of the phone?" So that's good to keep in mind. This is the part in the conversation where I'm tempted to just ask you more about your do not disturb settings, but I promised people some meditation talk. So how does this work? Like, how can meditation help us beyond, in addition to having a Apple Watch on our wrist? Tell me.
Yeah. Well, you asked, and I filibustered and didn't answer, but you asked, what is meditation? And the word meditation is a little bit like the word sports in that it describes a whole range of activities. Um, when I talk about meditation, generally, I'm talking about mindfulness meditation, which is derived from Buddhism, but has been secularized, and that secularization, that stripping away of religious lingo and metaphysical claims, is what has allowed this practice to be studied so extensively for the last 15, 20 years in laboratories. So we now have a pretty good sense of how this practice can lower anxiety and depression, boost your immune system, reduce your blood pressure. And we also have these brain scans that show that, short daily doses of this kind of meditation can change the parts of the brain associated with stress, associated with self-awareness, associated with self-compassion, and crucially for this discussion, associated with focus. Which is, pointing this part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, which regulates our capacity to pay attention. And we see in these brain studies that doing a little bit of mindfulness meditation can boost your attentional capacities, and so that's really helpful. And all of that in concert, the kind of the ability to pay attention, the ability to be self-aware, the ability to be sort of warm and friendly, that's kind of the cocktail that we need in order to manage our anxiety. So you want to be able to see that the anxiety is happening, because often we're kind of aware of a background static of worry, but that's kind of owning us and controlling us. But actually, if you can be very aware of, oh yeah, this is anxiety that's happening right now, I can see its component parts. It's like a swarm of bees in the chest. Maybe my ears are turning red. I'm having worrying thoughts. I have the ability to drill into it with my mind. In other words, to pay attention to it in a clear way, and in that way, it becomes workable. Instead of it happening kind of in the backdrop of your psyche, where you kind of know you're anxious, but you don't really know what to do about it. You can bring your full attention to it through meditation or through mindfulness, and work with it and watch that it will come and go, and you don't have to be owned by it. So what's the mechanism for this? We'll do a little bit of meditation, but it's pretty simple. Um, Beginning mindfulness meditation really has only three steps. The first is sit comfortably. You don't even have to sit. You can lie on the ground if you want. Close your eyes. The second is to bring your full attention to something that is based in your senses. So, like something that is not your thinking. So, the feeling of your breath coming in and going out, sounds in the environment, the feeling of your full body sitting or lying down, something sensual, not in the prurient sense, but based in the senses. Um, and then the third thing is the most important. Third step is because it sounds pretty easy to just kind of feel your breath coming in and going out, but most of us very quickly bump into a ton of distractions. Um, and many of us, when we notice how distractible we are, we tell ourselves a whole story about how we're uniquely unqualified to meditate, that we're doing it wrong. But this is my job on the planet now is to point out that what you think is you doing it wrong is actually you doing it right. Because the whole goal in meditation is just to notice when you've become distracted and to start again and again and again. And that waking up from distraction is the magic, because that is the process whereby you get more familiar with what your mind is like. You see, and pardon me, I'm going to work a little blue here. I'm going to be a little inappropriate. You see how fucking crazy you are, and then you're not as owned by all of your historical storylines, ancient resentments, neurotic obsessions, random desires, and that is so useful when it comes to anxiety, either based on not having your phone with you or anything else. All of the we're in an epidemic of anxiety. We've never seen levels of anxiety like we're seeing now, and so you want to be able to experience your anxiety in a way that allows you not to be owned by it. So that's not running from it. That's not pretending it's not there. It's this radical move of kind of turning toward it, feeling it fully, investigating, like, what is this like? And then you'll see, once you're paying attention, that it comes and goes, and you can make a saner decision on the other side. You can learn how to respond wisely to stuff instead of reacting blindly to everything that goes through your head.
Well, all that is really helpful to hear. So, oh, it's so funny. I was like, I need to look over here. You know why? Guess what I have next to me? This is totally random. What talking about, in case anybody wants more background about this particular type of meditation and its benefits that have been scientifically studied. John Kabat-Zinn wrote this book, Full Catastrophe Living, which is kind of like the go-to. I
Yes.
was basic mindfulness guide, but it's a little bit long, so maybe read 10% Happier by Dan. Um, I'm talking about a lot just the act of paying attention to what you're paying attention to, which is what I think you were touching on, and also getting to tune into the sensations in your body and the thoughts you're having in your mind without judging yourself for it. Because one thing
Yes.
say that I appreciate it is that when we're trying to meditate, as we will in a minute, and your mind wanders, which it will, because as one of my meditation teachers used to say, you have a mind. That's what they do. They come up with thoughts. We should not beat ourselves up for it, which is my go-to response to pretty much everything in life. So, um, but I really appreciate the way you're talking about just experiencing the anxiety as it shows up in your body, but not being angry about it, not judging ourselves for it, just allowing it to be there and just observe it almost like you're watching a movie as opposed to getting involved in the plot directly. Um,
Yes, and there's something really radical about that. It sounds counterintuitive, like, no, the fix for my anxiety has to be something that takes me out of it entirely. It has to be a bubble bath. It has to be taking a pill, and some of those things that's appropriate sometimes. Bubble baths, medication, if your doctor recommends it, whatever. There are ways to kind of switch your attention away from it, but there is also this way to bring your full attention to what you're feeling, and then you realize it's not as big and scary as you thought. And the one asterisk for this is, if you have capital T trauma, then I think you have to be a little bit careful about this exercise, and you might want to do your meditation with a trained mental health professional. But for the worried well, for the garden variety anxious among us, um, this is a really helpful technique to turn toward what's bothering us rather than running from it, and realize that you can work with it in ways that you might not have realized earlier.
Well, I think that's very useful, and I also think it's interesting to try to turn the phone from a source of anxiety, which, I mean, honestly, it will be forever for most of us, but to additionally have it as a reminder to check in with ourselves in this way. Then when you notice you're reaching for your phone and you start to you use the noticing of the reaching for the phone itself as a prompt to check in with yourself and to become a bit more mindful in that moment, even if you're not engaging in a formal meditation in that moment, but just say, "Oh,
Absolutely.
why did I reach for it? How do I feel? How do I want to respond?" Um,
Just to jump in on that, we don't meditate to the point of meditation isn't to like try to be an awesome meditator. It's to get better at life. And you can use the mindfulness, which is just a fancy way of saying self-awareness. You can use the mindfulness or self-awareness that you generate in your formal meditation practice for 1 minute, 2 minutes a day, 5 minutes a day. You can use that skill in the rest of your life. And so just as Catherine was saying, um, you recommend in your book, like, use the moment you see your zombie arm reaching for the phone as a kind of alarm, a mindfulness bell of like, yeah, the question you get people to ask is like, what do I want to feel right now? Why am I doing this? And is the phone the right answer? So I think this practice of meditation in the formal sense, and that will and we'll do it formally in a moment, is training for using mindfulness in the rest of your life.
Yeah, that's great. Before we jump into the actual meditation, I wanted to ask you can you briefly tell us a bit about the focus boosting benefits as well? And because a lot of people, actually pretty much everyone I speak to, when I talk to them about breaking up with their phones, they feel like their attention span is shot. And I always reassure them, it's not reassuring. I always tell them, you're right, it is shot because everything we do on our phones trains us to be distractible. Even now, Dan and I are having this conversation. On the bottom of our screens are all your comments, and there's like hearts going. I'm not looking at them because it will be too distracting, but we're just training our brains to constantly try to focus on multiple things at once. That really does make it harder to sit down at night and read a book for a while, which is something a lot of people want to do. So, can you comment briefly on the effect that meditation in particular has on attention spans? And then we can jump in and try one.
Yeah, with the caveat that I'm not a neuroscientist and I don't know the science chapter and verse.
Play one on TV. So,
Exactly. Yes. Um, Look, the very thing most of us beat ourselves up about during meditation, which is getting distracted and having to start again, is like a bicep curl for your brain, especially the attentional resources of your brain, the your faculty of focus. And so it's I think this bicep curl analogy is really useful. Instead of telling yourself some story that you can never do this, just realize, oh, this is the work. It is trying to focus on my breath, or picking one thing to focus on, often the breath. And then you start wondering, like, what's for lunch, what kind of bird was Big Bird, whatever. And you just wake up to that and start again and start again, and that starting over is the thing. That's not some magical state you're trying to get to where all thoughts have disappeared. Maybe that's possible for like people who are living in a monastery, but for most of us, that is not on the menu. What is on the menu is just focusing for a few nanoseconds at a time, getting distracted, starting again, getting distracted, starting again. That is good practice.
that's so helpful to hear because we're about to do this. And I know, I mean, I've been doing this for years myself. It's still the kind of like, oh, I had a thought, it failed. Oh, and so just know that that is the work. Like that noticing, you're succeeding. If you noticed it, you succeeded.
Yes.
So let's have you lead us in a short guided meditation, Dan, which is totally going to embarrass me because I hate closing my eyes in front of people. And this is like the uncomfortable sensation of people's eyes upon me with my eyes closed. And I also wanted to say for people in my audience who are watching, Dan does regular guided meditations like this on his own Substack, which is another reason I wanted to introduce you guys to each other because I think that's really cool to get to meditate live with someone. So
Yeah.
take us away, and I'll close my
Sure.
eyes and
So I should maybe I'll do 5 minutes.
perfect.
Okay, I'm going to set a little.
And people look down with a soft gaze, right? Like if you're at work right now, you don't want to close your eyes. Like you could
Oh yeah,
very
I'll give you lots of options. Don't worry.
okay. options.
All
I'll
right.
close going for it.
Okay. I'm going to close my eyes too. All right. So we talked about this earlier, but there are three steps. The first is to assume a comfortable enough position. If you want to sit cross-legged on the floor, that's cool. I sit in a chair. You can lie down. Um, Lots of options. It helps to have some dignity in your posture. Not necessary, but it can help keep you awake. Although if you fall asleep, that's not a problem, honestly. So we have assumed a reasonably comfortable position, eyes closed. If you are in a place where you don't feel like closing your eyes, you can kind of just gaze softly at a neutral spot on the ground. Step number two is we're going to pick something to focus on. We're going to pick what meditators call an object of attention. So some people, that's the breath. You could feel the belly rising and falling. You could feel the chest rising and falling, air coming in and out of the nose. If you don't want to focus on the breath, you can just feel the full body sitting in the chair or lying on the ground. Or you can focus in on like whatever your hands are feeling right now. Or you can focus on the sounds in the environment. Lots of options. Just pick something and commit to it for a couple minutes. And that brings us to the third and most important step. By now, many of you will have noticed how distractible the mind is. I sometimes joke that it's like trying to hold a live fish in your hands, it's just squirming away, making plans, rehearsing glorious expletive filled speeches you're going to deliver to somebody, whatever. Anytime you notice you've gotten distracted, just kind of blow it a kiss and gently escort your attention back to your breath or whatever else you've chosen to focus on. So I'm going to be quiet for like a minute and just let you do this. No matter how many times you get distracted, it is not a problem. In fact, as discussed, it is proof that you're doing this correctly because every time you wake up from distraction, you're getting familiar with the way your mind works, with the chaos and cacophony that is mostly just owning us subconsciously. So when you wake up from distraction, you can say to yourself, great job, welcome back, and then return to the breath or whatever you're focusing on. You're doing great. Just a few seconds left. Every time you get distracted, just return, begin again. Do the bicep curl for your brain. Okay, when you're ready, you can open your eyes and come back. Everybody survived, I hope.
Hopefully no casualties from our mindfulness. Wow, that was a fast 5 minutes.
Yeah, it's
It's not always fast, I should say. Normally when I meditate, I'm like, but
yeah,
yeah.
but that's it. Whatever whatever you're feeling, frustration, restlessness, embarrassment, it can all be co-opted. It can all be the object of your mindfulness. So in that way, the whole catastrophe, to use John Kabat-Zinn's term, becomes workable. You're you are uh, we have this capacity, to this capacity to be aware, to be mindful, to pay attention in the right kind of way, which is non-judgmental and with a certain amount of warmth to it, that can make even the hardest aspects of our personality tractable and workable, and that's really good news. As I often say, my job used to be, 30 years as an anchorman, my job used to be to deliver bad news. And now my job is really to deliver one very good piece of news, which is that your brain and your mind are trainable.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that's very important because we think we get stuck in these patterns and there's nothing we can do about it. But my own experience with mindfulness, I mean, it really has helped me. I don't know, you probably don't remember this, Dan, because but the first time we spoke for your podcast when I was on 10% Happier, you asked me some question about self kindness. And I immediately told you this story about a meditation retreat where I imagined kicking myself when I was a small child. Like it was, and I was like, oh, wow, I just told this man I just met in front of his like innumerable listeners about my self hatred. And I think I did say this when we first spoke, but mindfulness and my husband, who's very good at mindfulness. We did a whole mindfulness based stress reduction course together. Been so helpful in the self hatred regard. Um, so I encourage anyone. I mean, I know so many people struggle with that. I saw someone write a
Me too.
comment, 5 minutes, like a lot of tears can come out. But yeah, the self kindness, especially right now, I think is so important. I think one other thing that's been really useful for me is just to realize that, and you were saying this, Dan, but you don't just have to focus on your breath. If that doesn't work for you, for me personally, I really find that sounds are useful to try to
Yeah.
focus on,
Yeah.
or sensations that aren't just my breath. Something about the breath is like especially difficult.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
That's not uncommon. So there are a lot of people who struggle with the breath. It can be paradoxically anxiety producing to focus on the breath. So I like to give a lot of options. And you're right about this. You know, social media is Johan Hari, the great, who's a very good writer, has joked that social media is kind of like ego itching powder. It puts our propensity for self-flagellation, self-criticism, negative comparison to other people on steroids. Um, and mindfulness is a great way to see, yeah, the that you're doing it, and to not actually follow it down the path as far as you might otherwise go. And there are other skills, including self compassion, which I think take mindfulness, the sort of non judgmental awareness of what's happening, and add on top of it an active kind of positive self talk. And by which I don't mean like looking in the mirror and telling yourself you're great. I mean, like just channeling the capacity we all have to be a good friend or a good mentor to other people and directing that inwards. And if you combine mindfulness with self compassion, um, it really, for me, has been very helpful for the inner critic.
Yes, the inner critic can be so loud.
Yeah,
Well, I can't believe a half hour has already passed. I'm so grateful to you, Dan, for making the time to be with us today. And I wanted to say just a couple things in closing. One, I forgot to mention at the beginning, but I find particularly useful is to check in with yourself before you do a meditation, or maybe just reflect back on how you felt a half hour ago or whenever you tuned into this conversation. And then to check in with yourself afterwards to see how your body and your mind feels different. Maybe it feels the same, but what changes have you observed between when you first started and then when you actually consciously stopped what you were doing for a few minutes in your busy day and took time to tune into what was going on in your body. The other thing I was going to say is that people are asking, where can you take a mindfulness course? Well, mindfulness based stress reduction, you can look up online. There's a lot of different online resources and also in person 8-week courses. And I also wanted to just say again, I really recommend that people check out Dan's Substack, danharris.com, because he's sharing what you call self help for smart people all the time and talking a lot about meditation and getting much more in depth on your podcast 10% happier. But yeah, I just really wanted to thank you very much, Dan, for being a part of our phone breakup challenge. And it's just that I appreciate your friendship and your willingness to introduce this to my audience as well. I really appreciate it.
Right back at you. Thanks for having me on. Great to talk to you as always.
Great to talk to you too. And thank you, everyone. I'm Catherine Price. This is part of the How to Feel Alive Substack newsletter. Take care.
Bye, everybody.